Well, welcome back to continue the discussion where we go deeper into the chapters we've just studied. In this episode, we're focusing on Exodus chapter 15. The deep dive already explored the Song of the Sea, Miriam's prophetic role, and the bitter waters of Marah. But there's still more richness to uncover, especially when we consider archaeology, comparative ancient literature, and the symbolic undercurrents shaping Israel's early identity. Let's begin with the poetic structure of Exodus 15 and what it tells us about ancient Hebrew worship traditions. Scholars generally agree that the Song of the Sea is one of the oldest texts in the Hebrew Bible, likely composed near the time of the events themselves and transmitted orally before being written down. This passage stands apart from the surrounding prose both linguistically and rhythmically. It uses a distinct meter, typically 3-2 or 2-2 lines common in Hebrew poetry, and extensive parallelism, where ideas were echoed or contrasted in successive lines. The poetic form wasn't just aesthetic, it was mnemonic. It helped preserve the theology and the history of the Israelites in a time when oral tradition was the primary mode of transmission. What's also fascinating is how this ancient song parallels Canaanite and Egyptian hymn traditions. For example, Ugaritic poetry found in Sumerah, modern Syria, celebrates Baal's victories over the sea, echoing themes of divine conquest over chaos. Similarly, the Egyptian victory hymn of Mernemptah boasts of military conquests and divine favor. But Exodus 15 flips these ideas. Instead of divine chaos bringers, Israel's God is a stabilizer. He brings order to rescue by rescuing the weak and destroying the unjust power. Rather than the gods fighting for kings, Israel's God fights for the enslaved. Now let's turn our attention to Miriam. Though she only gets a few lines in this chapter, Miriam's presence is deeply significant. She is the first woman explicitly called a prophet in the Bible, using the Hebrew word neba'ai, and she leads the women in worship. This communal act of music, dance, and celebration was more than an emotional release. In the ancient Near East, female musicians often played key roles in religious ceremonies. Egyptian tomb paintings, for instance, depict women with tambourines in cultic contexts. What's unique here is that Miriam is not merely a ceremonial figure. She is named alongside Moses and Aaron, placing her within the prophetic leadership of Israel. Later, rabbinic and Christian traditions often minimize her, but the original text elevates her voice. There's something beautiful and powerful in that. Another important point of discussion is the theological anthropology in this chapter. What it says about the nature of humanity and how we respond to God. Exodus 15 shows two extremes: ecstatic praise and desperate complaint. This mirrors the emotional spectrum of trauma survivors. Psychologically, this is a community still recovering from generational oppression, suddenly thrust into freedom, trying to make sense of a God who saves dramatically one moment and tests quietly the next. The Israelites' emotional swings are not signs of faithlessness, but of spiritual reorientation. This is worth reflecting on in our own lives, how we transform from seasons of victory to seasons of testing, and how quickly we forget the miracle when the water tastes bitter. In that sense, Exodus 15 becomes a mirror. Let's also look at the symbolism of the water in this chapter. Water appears 3 times as the sea that destroys Pharaoh's army, the bitter water of Marah, and the abundant springs at Elim. In the ancient world, water symbolized both chaos and life. The sea was terrifying and untamable, representing disorder, especially in Babylonian and Canaanite myths. But fresh water symbolized fertility, abundance, and divine favor. The movement from the chaos of the sea to the bitter trial at Marah, and finally to the restful abundance at Elim, mirrors Israel's spiritual journey. It's a movement from danger to testing to restoration. In Egyptian theology, water had to be controlled through ritual and engineering, symbolizing Pharaoh's supposed divine ability to manage nature. But in Exodus 15, nature submits not to Pharaoh, but to Yahweh, the true Lord of creation. And instead of controlling water through force, God transforms it, making bitter things sweet and creating oasis in the desert. Lastly, let's talk about Exodus 15 in the broader arc of salvation history. This chapter becomes the blueprint for later deliverance songs. We see it in the echoes in the Psalms, in the prophetic books, and even in Revelation. Revelation 15:3-4 quotes directly from the Song of the Sea. Great and marvelous are your deeds, Lord God Almighty. In the New Testament, the Exodus is reinterpreted as a spiritual deliverance from sin and death. Jesus' own baptism in the Jordan River can be seen as a reenactment of Israel passing through water and being there to begin their mission. And the final redemption in the Christian theology, new creation, the new Jerusalem, is framed as the completion of what began in Exodus. God doesn't just free a people, he invites them to know him, worship him, and dwell with him. So what does this mean for us today? It means your worship matters. It means your trials and tests are not separate from your spiritual journey. They're part of it. And it means that God still leads us from sea to song and to struggle to sanctuary. The sweetness might not come immediately. The water may feel bitter, but he hasn't stopped walking with you. Thank you for staying with me for the deeper conversation. I hope this stirred something thoughtful and engaging in you. If you wrestle with something if you're wrestling with something right now, or if the water feels bitter, I pray you can still find hope in the God who redeems, who heals, and who leads you to the Elim. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you again for being a part of this journey. And we will see you in the next chapter tomorrow.